The aroma of fresh pancakes and sizzling bacon filled Rosie's Diner, a beloved staple in the quiet town of Oak Ridge, where locals gathered every morning for hearty breakfasts and casual conversations that often turned into community updates. The place had stood unchanged for decades, with its faded blue booths lining the walls, a vintage jukebox in the corner softly playing old country tunes that evoked memories of simpler times, and Rosie herself behind the counter, her apron stained from years of service as she flipped eggs with the kind of practiced hand that came from pure routine and dedication to her customers. It was the kind of spot where everyone knew your usual order before you even sat down, where the coffee was always hot and strong, and where strangers, though rare, tended to stick out like a sore thumb in this close-knit community that prided itself on familiarity and tradition. Colonel Jamal Hayes was no stranger to blending into various environments, having spent years in military service where adaptability was key to survival and success. But in Oak Ridge, his reserved demeanor and thoughtful presence sometimes drew curious glances from those unaccustomed to seeing someone like him frequent the diner so regularly. As a highly decorated veteran with multiple tours in challenging regions overseas, Hayes now held the commanding position at Sentinel Base, a vast military installation just on the outskirts of town that played a crucial role in monitoring potential threats and ensuring the safety of the skies over the entire region. The base was more than just a facility. It was the economic heartbeat of Oak Ridge, providing thousands of jobs to local residents, injecting substantial funds into businesses through contracts and spending, and even contributing to community improvements like better roads, upgraded schools, and enhanced emergency services that benefited everyone in ways they often took for granted. Hayes, however, preferred to keep a low profile during his weekly visits to Rosie's, opting for simple attire like khakis and a plain button-up shirt that revealed nothing of his rank or the immense responsibilities he carried, allowing him a brief moment of normalcy away from the high-stakes world of classified briefings and strategic operations. On this particular morning, as the sun filtered through the diner's large windows, casting a warm glow over the checkered linoleum floor, Hayes sat at his usual corner booth, sipping black coffee that was just the right temperature to savor without haste, while scanning headlines in the local newspaper about global events that echoed the very concerns he dealt with daily in his role at the base. His posture remained straight and composed, a habit ingrained from years of discipline in uniform, but his eyes were calm and observant, taking in the room without any sense of intrusion or judgment, simply appreciating the peaceful rhythm of everyday life that contrasted so sharply with the intensity of his professional duties. The other patrons went about their routines, old Mr. Jenkins nursing his tea while chatting with a neighbor about the latest town council meeting, young families enjoying weekend treats, and the waitress Lena bustling between tables with a friendly smile that made everyone feel welcome. Enter Officer Derek Hale, a sturdy man in his mid-32nd who carried himself with an air of unquestioned authority, his uniform always impeccably pressed and his badge shining brightly as if to serve as a constant reminder of his position in the community. Hale had been patrolling Oak Ridge for over a decade, building what he saw as a strong reputation for maintaining order, though his methods often left certain groups feeling uneasy and unfairly singled out in ways that whispered of deeper issues within the town's dynamics. He relied on a network of informal connections and a history of handling situations in a manner that prioritized quick resolutions over thorough fairness, with complaints against him tending to fade away in the bureaucracy, supported by superiors who valued team solidarity and a chief who often looked the other way to keep things running smoothly. As Hale swaggered into the diner that morning, his boots thudding against the floor, conversations among the patrons hushed slightly. A subtle shift in the atmosphere that spoke volumes about the respect or perhaps caution his presence commanded. He scanned the room with a practiced eye, noting familiar faces and assessing anything that seemed out of the ordinary, his mindset shaped by years on the job where he believed vigilance meant questioning those who didn't quite fit the mold he was comfortable with. His gaze inevitably locked onto Hayes in the corner booth, too composed, too consistent in his visits without engaging much in the local chatter, and something about that quiet confidence rubbed Hale the wrong way, stirring assumptions that had no basis in fact but were fueled by preconceived notions he rarely examined. What's a guy like you doing here every week? Hale thought to himself, his biases quietly influencing his decision to approach as he made his way over with deliberate, heavy steps, his hand resting casually on his hip near his holster in a gesture that was meant to convey control. "Morning, sir," Hale said, his voice carrying a tone of false politeness that didn't quite mask the underlying demand, mind showing some ID. "We've had reports of folks causing minor issues around here, and it's just routine to check." Hayes looked up slowly from his newspaper, folding it neatly with unhurried precision, his expression remaining steady and unflustered as he met Hale's eyes directly. "Good morning, officer," Hayes replied evenly, his voice calm and measured, reflecting the discipline of someone who had faced far more intense situations in his career. "I'm just enjoying my breakfast here. No issues on my end." Hale's jaw tightened slightly, as he wasn't accustomed to responses that lacked immediate deference or nervousness, which in his experience often confirmed his suspicions, though in reality it only highlighted his own approach. "ID, now." "Or you'll need to leave," Hale pressed, his stance widening as if to emphasize his authority in the now quiet diner. The room had fallen noticeably silent, with Rosie pausing mid-pour behind the counter, her coffee pot hovering in the air as she exchanged a worried glance with Lena, while regulars like Mr. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the tension building in what was usually a relaxed space. Hayes, maintaining his composure, reached into his pocket for his wallet, pulling out a driver's license without any sign of agitation. "Here you go, officer," he said, handing it over. Hale snatched the card, scrutinizing it with exaggerated care, reading the name aloud, just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Jamal Hayes, huh? Address is a P.O. box. That's a bit unusual. What do you do for work that brings you here so often?" Hayes replied simply, "Government service," keeping his answer straightforward and truthful without elaborating, as his role involved sensitive matters that weren't for casual discussion. Hale smirked, leaning in closer. "Yeah? What kind? Something that involves watching people or stirring things up?" Hayes met his gaze steadily. "The kind that helps keep places like this safe and secure." That response seemed to irritate Hale further, his face reddening as he handed back the ID with a dismissive flick. "Listen, buddy, this town's got no room for folks who think they're above simple questions. Finish your meal and get out. And maybe find another spot for your routine. Don't come back causing any more curiosity." Hayes stood up slowly, placing cash on the table that covered his bill generously, including a good tip for Lena, who had served him kindly each time. "Thank you for the meal," he said politely to Rosie, then turned to Hale with a firm but non-confrontational tone. "Officer, I've served this country for longer than you've likely worn that uniform, facing challenges that required real focus on protection and respect. Suggestions like yours won't alter my habits or my right to be here." Hale stepped slightly into the doorway, not fully blocking it, but making his point clear. "You heard me. Out and stay out if you know what's good for the peace around here." As Hayes walked out to his unmarked sedan parked across the street, its government plates subtle but official, he felt a mix of disappointment and resolve, already mentally composing a report on the encounter that could highlight potential risks to personnel in the area. Hale, watching him go, felt a surge of satisfaction from asserting his role, oblivious to the fact that Hayes was far from an ordinary visitor and that this interaction had just ignited a chain of events that would expose long-standing issues in the town's approach to fairness and community relations. Back at Sentinel Base later that day, Hayes commanded a team of 1,800 dedicated personnel overseeing advanced radar systems, missile defense protocols, and communication networks that formed a vital shield against various threats, ensuring the safety of the entire northeastern region, including Oak Ridge itself. The base's contributions to the town were immense, from employing locals in support roles to awarding contracts that kept businesses thriving, and even funding infrastructure like improved power grids and community centers that enhanced daily life for residents who might not fully realize how intertwined their prosperity was with the military presence. That evening, after a full day of briefings and strategic planning, Hayes sat at his desk in the Secure Command Center typing a secure email to his superiors, encountered an incident with local law enforcement during routine off-base activity. Appears to involve unwarranted scrutiny that could impact personnel morale and safety. Requesting guidance on next steps to address. The message was sent, and almost immediately the wheels of higher-level review began to turn, with military intelligence teams starting to flag the officer's name for further checks. Meanwhile, Hale returned to the police station, bragging to a couple of colleagues about how he had handled another potential issue at the diner, describing Hayes as someone who needed to be reminded of local expectations, while Chief Harlan Brooks nodded approvingly, filing away any minor note on the matter without much thought, as such occurrences had become part of the routine in maintaining what they saw as stability. Hale's history in Oak Ridge was something of an open secret among those who paid close attention. He had a pattern of stopping drivers from certain backgrounds for what he called routine checks, but which often felt like targeted inconveniences, like pulling over Latino residents for minor vehicle issues that others might overlook, or questioning black teenagers about their activities in public spaces that should have been free for all. Victims of these encounters, such as Maria Ruiz, a dedicated nurse who had once been detained briefly while waiting for her ride home after a long shift simply because she looked out of place in Hale's view, or young Tyrone Banks, who had been searched roughly after school for carrying nothing more than his backpack, often chose silence over escalation, fearing that speaking up could lead to further complications in their daily lives. But Hayes was not one to remain silent when it came to matters of principle, especially when they could affect the broader community he was tasked with protecting. As the sun set over Oak Ridge, casting long shadows across the quiet streets, Agent Kira Voss from the FBI's Civil Rights Division received the initial alert from military channels, her expertise in investigating patterns of unfair treatment in small towns making her the perfect lead to dig deeper. Voss began by pulling public records on Hale, noting a series of complaints that had been resolved without action, and even reaching out discreetly for anonymous tips from residents who might have stories to share now that something seemed to be stirring. Lena, the waitress who had witnessed the entire exchange at Rosie's, couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling from the morning. That night, as she cleaned up after her shift, she decided to search online for any information on Hayes, discovering subtle mentions of his military honors, including medals earned in demanding campaigns overseas and his rise to the rank of colonel, which left her wondering just who Hale had unwittingly challenged. This could be bigger than anyone realizes, she thought, sharing her findings in a private online chat with a few trusted friends who had their own quiet reservations about local practices. Hale, completely unaware of the gathering storm, continued his patrol that evening with his usual sense of assurance, stopping a group of workers heading home for what he deemed necessary verification, confident that his actions were keeping the town secure. But subtle cracks were beginning to form in the foundation of that confidence. A fellow officer, Sarah Klein, who had observed Hale's methods over the years and occasionally felt uneasy about them, couldn't help but reflect on the diner scene, thinking to herself, one day pushing too far might catch up to all of us. At Sentinel Base, as Hayes wrapped up his day with a final check on operational status, he briefed his deputy on the matter. This isn't just a personal slight. It's about ensuring our team feels supported in the communities we serve. If one officer acts this way without reason, it points to broader concerns that need addressing. The deputy agreed, and as the base's lights illuminated the night, symbolizing constant vigilance, the stage was set for revelations that would challenge Oak Ridge's status quo and highlight the interconnectedness of protection, fairness, and community well-being in ways that no one could have anticipated from a simple morning at the diner. Sentinel Base hummed with a constant, low-level activity, even under the cover of night, its massive radar dishes silently rotating against the starry sky as they scanned distant horizons for any signs of emerging threats that could range from aerial intrusions to more subtle digital vulnerabilities lurking in the vast expanse of cyberspace. Colonel Jamal Hayes paced the dimly lit confines of his office within the secure command center, the glow from multiple screens casting flickering shadows across his face as he reviewed the latest classified intelligence reports on potential cyber activities that mirrored the ongoing global tensions he monitored daily. Despite the pressing demands of his role, which required unwavering focus on strategic defenses that safeguarded not just Oak Ridge but the broader northeastern corridor, Hayes found his thoughts drifting back to the unsettling encounter at Rosie's Diner earlier that week, an incident that felt out of place in a country he had dedicated his life to protecting. It wasn't the first time he had encountered unwarranted scrutiny in his civilian life. As a black veteran who had risen through the ranks, facing subtle and overt challenges alike during his deployments in demanding overseas operations, he had developed a thick skin and a strategic mindset for handling such situations with grace and precision. But this felt different, more insidious, because it occurred in the very community intertwined with the base's mission, potentially signaling deeper issues that could affect the morale and safety of his entire team if left unaddressed. Hayes' initial report on the matter had been submitted through secure channels immediately after returning to base, and now, as expected, it had escalated rapidly within the military hierarchy, drawing attention from the Department of Defense's Oversight Division, who were always vigilant about any external factors that might compromise operational effectiveness or personnel well-being. They had already begun cross-referencing Officer Hale's name against federal databases, pulling up a preliminary profile that hinted at a pattern of complaints dismissed or unresolved over the years, prompting them to loop in specialized investigators from outside agencies to ensure a thorough review. Agent Kira Voss, a seasoned operative from the FBI's Civil Rights Division with a track record of unraveling entrenched issues in similar small communities where local dynamics often shielded problematic behaviors, received the dossier late that evening and immediately recognized the red flags: disproportionate interactions with certain demographics, vague resolutions to grievances, and a network of informal protections that seemed to insulate Hale from accountability. Voss wasted no time initiating discreet inquiries by reaching out via secure lines to potential witnesses who might provide context without alerting the subjects prematurely. Her first contact was Lena, the waitress from Rosie's, who answered the call with a mix of surprise and relief, recounting the diner scene in vivid detail. He just approached out of nowhere and demanded ID like the colonel was some kind of outsider causing problems. But he's been coming in regularly, always polite, leaves good tips, and never bothers anyone. Hale has this way of making things tense, and I've heard similar stories from others around town. Voss noted the consistency in Lena's account, probing gently for more insights into Hale's general conduct, which Lena shared hesitantly at first but with growing candor, mentioning overheard conversations about Hale's strict checks on certain neighborhoods that left residents feeling uneasy. As Voss compiled these initial statements, she delved deeper into Hale's background, piecing together a profile from public records, employment history, and anonymous tips that painted him as someone who had transitioned from a high school environment where he asserted dominance through intimidation to a law enforcement role where those tendencies found a structured outlet. Hale had joined the force straight out of community college, quickly earning praise for his proactive approach, but beneath the surface, his methods involved selective enforcement that disproportionately affected those from diverse backgrounds, such as pulling over vehicles with out-of-state plates driven by people who didn't match his idea of local norms, or questioning groups in public spaces with an intensity that bordered on overreach, victims began to emerge in Voss's growing file. Maria Ruiz, the nurse who described in a recorded interview how Hale had detained her briefly one evening while she waited for transportation after a grueling shift, citing vague suspicions that made her feel singled out based on appearance alone, leaving her shaken and reluctant to venture out late thereafter. Tyrone Banks, a promising young student who recalled being stopped and searched after basketball practice, his backpack rummaged through without clear justification, an experience that made him wary of authority figures despite his clean record. Chief Harlan Brooks' role in this ecosystem became increasingly apparent as Voss uncovered internal memos where Brooks had advised Hale to adjust tactics for optics, but ultimately endorsed his results, prioritizing what he called departmental cohesion over rigorous scrutiny of methods that might stir controversy. Brooks had buried several reports over the years, categorizing them as minor or unsubstantiated to avoid external reviews, creating a shield that allowed patterns to persist unchecked. Voss's investigation gained momentum as she coordinated with Department of Defense liaisons, emphasizing Sentinel Base's critical importance. Its systems not only monitored for physical threats like unauthorized aircraft, but also defended against sophisticated electronic interferences that could disrupt regional stability, making any harassment of its personnel a matter of broader concern. Back at the base, Hayes faced the first signs of escalation when, a few days after the diner incident, Hale pulled him over on a dimly lit road leading out of town, his patrol car's lights flashing aggressively as he claimed a minor vehicle issue that Hayes knew was fabricated. "Taillights out," Hale announced through the window, his spotlight beaming directly into Hayes' eyes in a disorienting manner. Hayes complied calmly, stepping out while discreetly activating his phone's recording feature, a precaution honed from years of operational caution. "Officer, this seems like an extension of our previous conversation. May I ask the basis for this stop?" Hayes inquired evenly. Hale leaned in closer, his tone sharpening. "You think you're above routine checks? I decide what's necessary here." Hayes responded without raising his voice. "And my work involves ensuring protections that extend to communities like this from genuine concerns." The encounter ended with Hale issuing a questionable citation, but Hayes had captured the audio, which he promptly uploaded to the secure federal portal for review. Voss listened to the recording multiple times, annotating clear instances of potential overreach, lack of verifiable cause for the stop, tone suggesting personal motivation rather than professional duty, and implications that could point to ongoing targeting. At Sentinel Base, the ripple effects were felt as Hayes' deputy, Major Elena Torres, expressed growing worries during a private briefing. "Sir," word spreading among the team, "some families are hearing about this and questioning if off-base activities are safe, especially for those who stand out." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "It's not isolated. If unchecked, it undermines the trust we build with the locals we ultimately serve. We'll handle it through channels, but vigilance is key." Voss continued to fortify her case, reaching out to Officer Sarah Klein, a colleague of Hale's who had observed his approaches over time and harbored private doubts about their fairness. In a confidential meeting arranged at a neutral location, Klein confessed with a heavy sigh, "I've seen him push boundaries, like adding details to reports that weren't quite accurate to justify actions, once even with a young person who just questioned him." This breakthrough provided insider perspective, corroborating the external accounts and exposing the internal dynamics that perpetuated the issues. More narratives flooded Voss's inbox as community members, emboldened by subtle rumors of an inquiry, shared their experiences. A shop owner from an Asian background who faced repeated visits citing minor code concerns after a polite dispute over a parking matter. A veteran from indigenous heritage who was cited for lingering in a public area that should have been open to all. The patterns were undeniable: selective attention leading to escalation, followed by subtle forms of follow-up that discouraged complaints, often coordinated with other municipal services to amplify pressure without direct traceability. Hale, sensing an unusual undercurrent at the station with colleagues avoiding certain topics, began to feel the pressure mounting, though he dismissed it as paranoia at first, doubling down by confronting Hayes again at a local gas station during a refuel stop. "You keep showing up, maybe I need to look closer into your story," Hale said, approaching with a forced casualness. Hayes, unflinching, replied, "Look as thoroughly as procedures allow. The facts will speak for themselves." That exchange left Hale unsettled, prompting him to attempt some basic online searches later that night, uncovering Hayes's public veteran records but missing the classified layers that defined his current stature, leading Hale to mutter dismissively, probably exaggerating his importance, as he plotted ways to discourage further presence. Voss, in coordination with DoD representatives, highlighted the stakes. Sentinel's defenses were integral to national preparedness, countering not just overt dangers, but also emerging risks like drone swarms or signal jamming that could affect civilian infrastructure tied to the town. Tensions reached a boiling point at the annual town fair, where colorful booths and lively music filled the Central Park, drawing families and visitors alike for games and festivities. Hale spotted Hayes engaging in light conversation with a group of locals near a food stand, his presence blending seamlessly as he discussed general community topics without revealing specifics. Seizing the moment, Hale approached publicly, raising his voice just enough to draw attention. "Folks, be cautious. Some individuals raise questions with their patterns." Hayes turned calmly, addressing Hale directly but audibly. "Officer, your focus might be better directed at actual community needs rather than assumptions." The crowd murmured, with Lena discreetly filming the interaction on her phone and later posting it anonymously to a local forum, where it quickly gained traction and sparked online discussions that amplified calls for transparency. Voss monitored the viral spread, using it as leverage to expedite subpoenas for station records, leading to a discreet raid where digital files were seized, revealing altered logs and deleted entries that Brooks had attempted to cover in a panic, his actions captured on surveillance that would later prove damning. As the shadows of evening lengthened over Oak Ridge, Hayes reflected in his quarters on his own past in the military, surviving intense operations where quick thinking and alliances were key, leading teams through uncertain terrains with a commitment to principles that transcended personal grievances. "This is another form of engagement," he confided to Torres during a late-night strategy session, "but will prevail by relying on evidence and process, not confrontation." The chapter thus unfolded a tapestry of unearthed histories and mounting pressures, shifting the narrative from an isolated event to a web of systemic challenges poised for confrontation, setting the stage for inevitable reckonings while maintaining a fresh exploration of character depths and investigative intricacies that kept the unfolding drama engaging and distinct. Federal vehicles converged on Oak Ridge at the break of dawn, their engines humming softly against the quiet backdrop of a town still wrapped in slumber, as Agent Kira Voss orchestrated the meticulously planned operation with the precision of someone who had spent weeks building an airtight case from threads of evidence that now formed an unbreakable web. The arrests began simultaneously to prevent any chance of coordination or evidence tampering. Officer Derek Hale was roused from his morning routine by a firm knock, opening his door to face a team of agents who presented warrants for civil rights infringements, conspiracy to obstruct fair practices, and interference with official duties, his protests echoing down the street as handcuffs clicked into place, marking the end of his unchecked tenure. Chief Harlan Brooks, reviewing overnight logs in his home office, met a similar fate. The documents he had long manipulated now turning against him as charges of aiding in cover-ups and failing to uphold standards were read aloud, his expression shifting from surprise to resignation as he realized the full extent of the fallout from years of prioritizing internal loyalty over broader responsibilities. 2 city council members, whose roles in quelling complaints through back-channel influences had been exposed through financial trails and communication records, were detained at their residences, their plea deals later revealing how they had traded favors to maintain a facade of harmony that benefited a select few. Voss's team, bolstered by Department of Defense support to underscore the national security angles tied to Sentinel Base, seized computers, files, and devices from the police station, uncovering additional layers of manipulated reports that would strengthen the prosecutions. The press conference that followed mid-morning drew a crowd of local reporters and curious residents outside the town hall, where Voss stood at the podium with a composed demeanor outlining the findings. Our investigation has revealed a sustained pattern of unfair treatment and institutional oversights that undermine community trust. Today marks a step toward restoration through accountability and reform. Colonel Jamal Hayes observed the unfolding events from the secure vantage of Sentinel Base, where enhanced protocols had been implemented to monitor any potential ripple effects on operations. His role as a key witness, providing crucial testimony via recorded statements that detailed the encounters without exaggeration, emphasizing the broader implications for personnel who contributed so vitally to regional safety. The Department of Defense issued a supportive statement praising Hayes' handling of the situation as exemplary of the values upheld by those in service, while subtly reinforcing the base's integral role in defending against diverse threats, from electronic disruptions to physical encroachments, thereby highlighting how local disruptions could have wider repercussions. Trials commenced in the following weeks at the federal courthouse in a nearby city, drawing attention from national outlets intrigued by the intersection of community dynamics and military interests. Hale took the stand first, his defense attempting to frame his actions as zealous protection of the town. But witness after witness dismantled that narrative. Maria Ruiz testified with quiet strength about the lingering impact of her unwarranted detention, explaining how it had made her hesitate in everyday activities. Tyrone Banks, now more confident from the support of advocacy groups, described the search that had shaken his sense of security, his words resonating in the courtroom as evidence of a pattern that extended beyond isolated events. Sarah Klein's testimony proved pivotal, detailing internal discussions where concerns were dismissed, her decision to speak out earning her protection under federal programs and symbolizing a break from the cycle of complicity. Hale was convicted on multiple counts, sentenced to 15 years in a facility focused on rehabilitation, his assets forfeited to fund community initiatives, stripping away the symbols of authority he had once wielded so freely. Brooks received an 8-year term for his enabling role, his cooperation in detailing the network leading to reduced time but permanent exclusion from any oversight positions, his reflections in court acknowledging the harm caused by misplaced priorities. The council members opted for pleas agreeing to community service and financial restitution that supported education on fair practices, their public apologies broadcast locally to foster transparency. Oak Ridge initially grappled with the economic tremors, businesses voicing fears that strained relations with the base might lead to reduced contracts or relocations, but Hayes intervened as an advocate, meeting with interim leaders to emphasize that accountability strengthened ties rather than severed them, resulting in federal grants tied to reform efforts that bolstered local infrastructure like updated communication systems and training facilities. The police department underwent a complete overhaul under interim chief Lisa Grant, a seasoned professional from a larger agency known for innovative community engagement, who introduced mandatory body cameras with real-time oversight, workshops on cultural awareness that involved base personnel as guest speakers, and partnerships with schools to teach about mutual respect and shared responsibilities. Crime statistics remained stable, but reports of positive interactions surged, with residents like families from diverse backgrounds feeling empowered to engage without apprehension, leading to collaborative events such as neighborhood watches, co-hosted with base volunteers. Hayes became a quiet bridge in this renewal, hosting open forums at Sentinel where unclassified presentations demystified the base's contributions, explaining how its monitoring of environmental data aided in disaster preparedness, or how joint exercises with local responders enhanced overall readiness, fostering a sense of unity that replaced previous divides. Personal stories of transformation emerged as beacons of hope. Lena transitioned from her diner role to leading a local advocacy group, organizing seminars on recognizing and addressing unfair treatment. Her viral video from the fair serving as a catalyst for broader discussions. Maria Ruiz, inspired by the outcomes, pursued certification in community mediation, volunteering to facilitate dialogues between residents and authorities. Tyrone Banks channeled his experience into academic pursuits, earning scholarships to study policy with a focus on equitable systems. His essays, published in regional journals as examples of youth-driven change. Hale, from his new confines, received mandated counseling that prompted reluctant self-examination, though his path to personal growth remained private and ongoing. The national ripple effects amplified the case's significance, with congressional hearings citing it as a model for legislation that streamlined federal interventions in similar scenarios, easing pathways for communities to seek external reviews when local mechanisms faltered. Justice Department trainers incorporated elements of the investigation into curricula, using anonymized case studies to illustrate the importance of vigilance and collaboration across agencies. In Oak Ridge, the business sector adapted positively, with owners like those who had once overlooked concerns now sponsoring inclusivity programs, recognizing that a harmonious environment attracted more base-related investments, leading to expansions in services and employment opportunities. Educational reforms followed, with schools integrating modules on civic responsibilities and historical contexts of service, inviting Hayes to speak on occasions where he shared insights from his career, stressing that true protection arose from understanding and cooperation rather than division. As months passed, Rosie's Diner became a symbol of the shift, its booths now hosting mixed gatherings of base families and locals exchanging stories over meals, the atmosphere lighter and more inclusive. Hayes continued his weekly visits, now greeted with genuine warmth, engaging in conversations that bridged worlds, discussing everything from base initiatives like youth STEM camps to town events such as cultural festivals that celebrated diversity. One crisp morning, Chief Grant joined him at the counter for coffee, their discussion flowing into plans for joint safety drills that would involve community input, exemplifying the new era of partnership. Your steadiness set this in motion, Grant noted appreciatively. Hayes smiled modestly. It was about upholding principles. We all share service to something greater. The base itself flourished with enhanced community programs, including mentorship schemes where personnel guided local youth in leadership skills, and collaborative research on sustainable technologies that benefited both military efficiency and town resources. National recognition came in the form of awards for reform excellence, with Oak Ridge profiled in media as a turnaround story, inspiring other areas to self-assess and implement proactive changes. Hayes, reflecting during a quiet evening, overlooking the base's operations, considered the journey from that initial diner moment to this renewed landscape, appreciating how individual resolve could spark collective progress, ensuring that protections extended equitably to all. The town that had once allowed oversights to linger now stood as a testament to resilience, with authorities viewed as partners in progress, fostering an environment where everyone contributed to a shared sense of security and belonging, proving that renewal not only mends past fractures but builds stronger foundations for the future.